Greetings everyone, my name is Gigi and this is Let's Build, wherein I build a brick set tied to different media and talk about the facts concerning the topic of the build. Today's build is the Alaska Totem Pole MiniBlock set versus Brother Bear for the Game Boy Advance. The footage I am using for this game is for science, educational, and research purposes. My content is transformative and protected under fair use. All footage is time-lapsed with commentary. I apologize in advance for pronouncing names and/or places incorrectly. Specifications for the brick set. Intricate totem pole building set. Recreate the cultural richness of Alaska with the MiniBlock Alaska Totem Pole set, featuring detailed and realistic elements. What's in the box? Contains 839 pieces to build a detailed model of an Alaskan totem pole. Features and functions. The totem pole model includes realistic details such as carved figures, vibrant colors, and traditional design. A gift for cultural enthusiasts and builders. Ideal for teens, adults, and anyone who loves Indigenous art, cultural history, and model building. Dimensions. Measures over 80 millimeters long, 124 millimeters wide, and 241 millimeters high. Celebrate the cultural heritage of Alaska with this MiniBlock Alaska Totem Pole building set. This detailed set allows you to construct a lifelike model of an Alaskan totem pole, capturing the intricate carvings and vibrant colors that symbolize the rich traditions of Indigenous peoples. With 839 pieces, you can build a highly detailed model that showcases the carved figures, traditional designs, and cultural significance of totem poles. Learn fascinating facts about totem poles as you build. Did you know that totem poles are monumental carvings created by Indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest, each telling a story or representing important cultural symbols and family lineage? The MiniBlock set brings these incredible details to life with its realistic design elements, allowing you to appreciate the artistry and historical importance of totem poles. The Alaska Totem Pole set is perfect for both cultural enthusiasts and builders. Whether you're passionate about Indigenous art or looking for a unique building challenge, this model provides a rewarding building experience and a striking display piece. Teachers and parents can also use this model to engage young builders in lessons about Indigenous cultures, the significance of totem poles, and the importance of cultural preservation. The realistic details and educational value make this set a standout addition to any collection. Enhance your appreciation for cultural history while enjoying hours of creative fun. The MiniBlock Builder app provides interactive 3D model views and step-by-step building instructions to guide you through the assembly process. Whether you're displaying this model in a classroom, using it as a centerpiece in your home, or incorporating it into a larger cultural exhibit, the MiniBlock Alaska Totem Pole set is sure to inspire awe and respect for the rich heritage of Alaska's Indigenous peoples. Contains 839 pieces. Totem poles are monumental carvings found in Western Canada and the Northwestern United States. They are a type of Indigenous Northwest Coast art consisting of poles, posts, or pillars carved with symbols or figures. They are usually made from large trees, mostly western red cedar, by First Nations and Indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest Coast, including northern Northwest Coast Haida, Tlingit, and Tsimshian communities in the southeast Alaska and British Columbia, Kwakwaka'wakw and Nuu-chah-nulth communities in southern British Columbia, and the Coast Salish communities of Washington and British Columbia. The word totem derives from the Algonquin meaning his kinship group. The carvings may symbolize or commemorate ancestors, cultural beliefs that recount familiar legends, clan lineage, or notable events. The poles may also serve as a functional architectural feature, welcome signs for village visitors, mortuary vessels for the remains of deceased ancestors, or as a means to publicly ridicule someone. They may embody a historical narrative of significance to the people carving and installing the pole. Given the complexity and the symbolic meanings of these various carvings, their placement and importance lies in the observer's knowledge and connection to the meanings of the figures and the culture in which they are embedded. Contrary to common misconception, they are not worshipped or the subject of spiritual practice, nor were they used by all indigenous peoples in the Americas. History. Totem poles serve as important illustrations of family lineage and the cultural heritage of the indigenous peoples of the islands and coastal areas of the North American Pacific Northwest, especially British Columbia, Canada, and coastal areas of Washington and southeastern Alaska in the United States. The poles are typically carved from the highly rot-resistant trunks of giant cedar or western red cedar, which eventually decay in the moist, rainy climate of the coastal Pacific Northwest. Because of the region's climate and the nature of the materials used to make the poles, few examples carved before 1900 remain. Noteworthy examples, some dating as far back as 1880, include those at the Royal British Columbia Museum in Victoria, the Museum of Anthropology at UBC in Vancouver, the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, and the Totem Heritage Center in Ketchikan, Alaska. Totem poles are the largest, but not the only, objects that coastal Pacific Northwest natives use to depict spiritual reverence, family legends, and culturally important animals, people, or historical events. The freestanding poles, seen by the region's first European explorers, were likely preceded by a long history of decorative carving. Stylistic features of these poles were borrowed from earlier, smaller prototypes, or from the interior support posts of house beams. Although 18th century accounts of European explorers traveling along the coast indicate that decorated interior and exterior house posts existed prior to 1800, the posts were smaller and fewer in number than subsequent decades. Prior to the 19th century, the lack of efficient carving tools, along with sufficient wealth and leisure time to devote to the craft, delayed the development of elaborately carved freestanding poles. Before iron and steel arrived in the area, artists used tools made of stone, shells, or beaver's teeth for carving. The process was slow and laborious. Axes were unknown. By the late 18th century, the use of metal carving tools enabled more complex carvings and increased production of totem poles. The tall monumental poles appearing in front of homes in coastal villages probably did not appear until after the beginning of the 19th century. Eddie Mullen has proposed that totem poles progressed from house posts, funerary containers, and memorial markers into symbols of clan and family wealth and prestige. He argues that the Haida people of the islands of Haida Gwaii originated carving of the poles, and that the practice spread outward to the Tsimshian and Tlingit, and then down to the coast to the indigenous people of British Columbia and northern Washington. Mullen's story is supported by the photographic documentation of the Pacific Northwest's coast's cultural history and the more sophisticated designs of the Haida poles. Accounts from the 1700s described and illustrate carved poles and timber homes along the coast of the Pacific Northwest. By the early 19th century, widespread importation of steel and iron tools from Great Britain, the United States, and elsewhere led to easier and more rapid production of carved wood goods, including poles. In the 19th century, American and European trade and settlement initially led to the growth of the totem pole carving, But United States and Canadian policies and practices of acculturation and assimilation caused a decline in the development of Alaska Native and First Nations cultures and their crafts, and sharply reduced totem pole production by the end of the century. Between 1830 and 1880, the maritime fur trade, mining, and fisheries gave rise to an accumulation of wealth along the coastal peoples. Much of it was spent and distributed in lavish potlatch celebrations, frequently associated with the construction and erection of the totem poles. The monumental poles commissioned by wealthy family leaders to represent their social status and the importance of their families and clans. In the 1880s and 1890s, tourists, collectors, scientists, and naturalists interested in indigenous culture collected and photographed totem poles and other artifacts, many of which were put on display at expositions such as the 1876 Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the 1893 World's Columbia Exposition in Chicago, Illinois. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, before the passage of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1978, the practice of indigenous religion was outlawed, and the traditional indigenous cultural practices were also strongly discouraged by Christian missionaries. This included the carving of totem poles. Missionaries urged converts to cease production and destroy existing poles. Nearly all totem pole making had ceased by 1901. Carving of monumental and mortuary poles continued in some more remote villages as late as 1905. However, as the original sites were abandoned, the poles and timber homes were left to decay and vandalism. Beginning in the late 1930s, a combination of cultural, linguistic, and artistic revivals, along with scholarly interest and the continuing fascination and support of an educated and empathetic public, led to a renewal and extension of this artistic tradition. In 1938, the United States Forest Service began a program to reconstruct and preserve the old poles, salvaging about 200, roughly 1/3 of those known to be standing at the end of the 19th century. With renewed interest in indigenous arts and traditions in the 1960s and 1970s, freshly carved totem poles were erected up and down the coast, while related artistic production was introduced in many new and traditional media, ranging from tourist trinkets to masterful works in wood, stone, and blown and etched glass, and other traditional and non-traditional media. In June 2022, during the Biennial Celebration Festival in Juneau, Alaska, the Sealaskan Heritage Institute unveiled the first 360-degree totem pole in Alaska, the 6.7-meter tall, or 22 feet, Sealaskan Cultural Values Totem Pole. The structure, carved out of a 600-year-old cedar tree, represents all three tribes of the southeast Alaska, the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian. Meaning and purpose. Totem poles can symbolize characters and events in mythology or convey the experiences of recent ancestors and living people. Some of these characters may appear as stylistic representations of objects in nature, while others are more realistically carved. Pole carvings may include animals, fish, plants, insects, and humans, or they may represent supernatural beings such as the thunderbird. Some symbolize beings that can transform themselves into another form, appearing as combinations of animals or part animal, part human forms. Consistent use of a specific character over time, with some slight variations in carving style, helped develop similarities among these shared symbols that allowed people to recognize one from another. For example, the raven is symbolized by a long, straight beak, while the eagle's beak is curved, and a beaver is depicted with two large front teeth, a piece of wood held in its paws, and a paddle-shaped tail. The meanings of the designs on totem poles are as varied as the cultures that make them. Some poles celebrate cultural beliefs that may recount familiar legends, clan lineages, or notable events, while others are mostly artistic. Animals and other characters carved on the pole are typically used as symbols to represent characters or events in a story. However, some may reference the moiety of the pole's owner, or simply fill up the empty space on the pole. Depictions of thrusting tongues and linked tongues may symbolize socio-political power. The carved figures interlock one above the other to create an overall design, which may rise to a height of 60 feet or more. Smaller carvings may be positioned in vacant spaces, or they may be tucked inside the ears or hang out of the mouths of the pole's larger figures. Some of the figures on the poles constitute symbolic reminders of quarrels, murders, deaths, and other unpleasant occurrences about which the Native Americans prefer to remain silent. The most widely known tales, like those of the exploits of Raven and of Cats, who married the Bear women, are familiar to almost every native in the area. Carvings which symbolize these tales are sufficiently conventionalized to be readily recognizable even by persons whose lineage did not recount them as their own legendary history. Peoples from cultures that do not carve totem poles often assume that the linear representation of the figures places the most importance on the highest figure, an idea that became pervasive in the dominant culture after it entered into a mainstream parlance by the 1930s with the phrase "low man on the totem pole." However, native sources either reject the lineage component altogether or reverse the hierarchy, with the most important representations on the bottom bearing the weight of all the other figures, or at eye level with the viewer to heighten their significance. Many poles have no vertical arrangement at all, consisting of a lone figure atop an undecorated column. Types? There are 6 basic types of upright pole carvings that are commonly referred to as totem poles. Not all involve the carving of what may be considered a totem figure. House frontal poles, interior house posts, mortuary poles, memorial poles, welcome poles, and the ridicule or shame pole. House frontal poles. This type of pole, usually 20 to 40 feet tall, is the most decorative. Its carvings tell the story of the family, clan, or village who own them. These poles are also known as heraldic, crest, or family poles. Poles of this type are placed outside the clan house of the most important village leaders. Often, watchman figures are carved at the top of the pole to protect the pole owner's family and village. Another type of house frontal pole is the entrance or doorway pole, which is attached to the center of the home and includes an oval-shaped opening through the base that serves as the entrance to the clan house. House posts. These interior poles, typically 7 to 10 feet in height, are usually shorter than exterior poles. The interior posts support the roof beam of a clan house and include a large notch at the top, where the beam can rest. A clan house may have 2 to 4 or more house posts, depending on the cultural group who built it. Carvings on these poles, like those of the house frontal poles, are often used as a storytelling device and help tell the story of the owner's family history. House posts were carved by the Coast Salish and were more common than the freestanding totem poles seen in northern cultural groups. Mortuary pole. The rarest type of pole carving is a mortuary structure that incorporates grave boxes with carved supporting poles. It may include a recessed back to hold the grave box. These are among the tallest and most prominent poles, reaching 50 to 70 feet in height. The Haida and Tlingit people erect mortuary poles at the death of important individuals in a community. These poles may have a single figure carved at the top, which may depict the clan's crest, but carvings usually cover the entire length. Ashes or the body of the deceased person are placed in the upper portion of the pole. Memorial pole. This type of pole, which usually stands in front of a clan house, is erected about a year after a person has died. The clan chief's memorial pole may be raised at the center of the village. The pole's purpose is to honor the deceased person and identify the relative who is taking over as his successor within the clan and the community. Traditionally, the memorial pole has one carved figure at the top, but an additional figure may also be added at the bottom of the pole. Memorial poles may also commemorate an event. For example, several memorial totem poles were erected by the Tlingits in honor of Abraham Lincoln, one of which was relocated to Saxman, Alaska in 1938. The Lincoln pole at Saxman commemorates the end of hostilities between two rival Tlingit clans and symbolizes the hope for peace and prosperity following the American occupation of Alaskan territory. The story begins in 1868, when the United States government built a customs house and fort on Tungas Island and left the U.S. revenue cutter Lincoln in the patrol area. After American soldiers at the fort and aboard the Lincoln provided protection to the Tongass group against its rival, the Kwakwaka'wakw, the Tongass group commissioned the Lincoln pole to commemorate the event. Welcome pole, carved by Kwakwaka'wakw, Salish, and Nuu-chah-nulth people. Most of the poles include large carvings of human figures, some as tall as 40 feet. Welcome poles are placed at the edge of a stream or saltwater beach to welcome guests to the community or possibly to intimidate strangers. The shame or ridicule pole. Poles used for public ridicule are usually called shame poles and were created to embarrass individuals or groups for their unpaid debts or when they did something wrong. The poles are often placed in prominent locations and removed after the debt is paid or the wrong is corrected. Shame pole carvings represent the person being shamed. One famous shame pole is the Seward pole at Saxman Totem Park in Saxman, Alaska. Originally carved in 1885, the pole shamed former U.S. Secretary of State William H. Seward for his lack of recognition of indigenous peoples at an early point in Alaska's U.S. history, as well as not reciprocating the generosity of his Tlingit hosts following an 1869 potlatch given in his honor. The figure's red painted nose and ears may symbolize drunkenness or Seward's stinginess. In the 1940s, a second iteration of the pole was built by Tlingit men enrolled in the Civilian Conservation Corps. According to the Alaska Historical Society, the United States government was unaware that the pole's intent was to shame Seward until after the completion of the project. In 2014, the second pole began to fall apart. A renewed version was carved in 2017 by local Tlingit artist Stephen Jackson, who combined political caricature with Northwest Coast style. Another example of the shame pole is the Three Frogs pole at Chief Stakes Island at Wrangell, Alaska. This pole was erected by Chief Shakes to shame the Kiksadi clan into repaying a debt incurred for the support of 3 Kiksadi women who were allegedly cohabitating with 3 slaves in Shakes' household. When the Kiksadi leaders refused to pay support for the women, Shakes commissioned a pole with carvings of 3 frogs, which represented the crest of the Kiksadi clan. It is not known if the debt was ever repaid. The pole stands next to Chief Shakes' tribal house in Wrangell. The pole's unique crossbar shape has become popularly associated with the town of Wrangell and continues to be used as part of the Wrangell Sentinel newspaper's masthead. In 1942, the U.S. Forest Service commissioned a pole to commemorate Alexander Baranov, the Russian governor and Russian-American company manager, as a civilian works project. The pole's original intent was to commemorate a peace treaty between the Russians and Tlingits that the governor helped broker in 1805. George Benson, a Sitka carver and craftsman, created the original design. The completed version originally stood in Totem Square in downtown Sitka, Alaska. When Benson and other Sitka carvers were not available to do the work, the U.S. Forest Service had CCC workers carve the pole in Wrangell, Alaska. Because Sitka and Wrangell native groups were rivals, it has been argued that the Wrangell carvers may have altered Benson's original design. For unknown reasons, the Wrangell carvers depicted Baranov figure without clothes. Following a Sitka Tribe of Alaska sponsored removal ceremony, the pole was lowered due to safety concerns on October 20th, 2010, using funds from the Alaska Department of Health and Social Services. The Sitka Sentinel reported that while standing, it was said to be the most photographed totem pole in Alaska. The pole was re-elected in Totem Square in 2011. On March 24, 2007, a shame pole was erected in Cordova, Alaska, that includes the inverted and distorted face of former Exxon CEO Lee Raymond. The pole represents the unpaid debt of $5 billion in punitive damages that a federal court in Anchorage, Alaska, determined Exxon owes for its role in causing the Exxon Valdez oil spill in the Prince William Sound. Construction and maintenance. Carvers select a tree to be used for the totem pole, often a red cedar. Then it is cut down and moved to the carving site, where the bark and outer layer of wood, sapwood, is removed. Next, the side of the tree to be carved is chosen and the back half of the tree is removed. The center of the log is hollowed out to make it lighter and to keep it from cracking. Early tools used to carve totem poles were made of stone, shell, or bone, but beginning in the late 1700s, the use of iron tools made the carving work faster and easier. In the early days, the basic design for figures may have been painted on the wood to guide the carvers, but today's carvers use paper patterns as outlines for their designs. Carvers use chainsaws to make the rough shapes and cuts, while adzes and chisels are used to chop the wood. Carvers use knives and other woodworking tools to add the finer details. When the carving is complete, paint is added to enhance specific details of the features. Raising a totem pole is rarely done using modern methods, even for poles installed in modern settings. Most artists use a traditional method followed by a pole raising ceremony. The traditional method calls for a deep trench to be dug. One end of the pole is placed at the bottom of the trench. The other is supported at an upward angle by a wooden scaffold. Hundreds of strong men haul the pole upright into its footing, while others steady the pole from side ropes and brace it with crossbeams. Once the pole is upright, the trench is filled with rocks and dirt. After the raising is completed, the carver, the carver's assistants, and others invited to attend the event perform a celebratory dance next to the pole. A community potlatch celebration typically follows the pole raising to commemorate the event. Totem poles are typically not well maintained after their installation and the potlatch celebration. The poles usually last from 60 to 80 years. Only a few have stood longer than 75 years, and even fewer have reached 100 years of age. Once the wood rots so badly that the pole begins to lean and pose a threat to a passerby, it is either destroyed or pushed over and removed. Older poles typically fall over during the winter storms that batter the coasts. The owners of a collapsed pole may commission a new one to replace it. Cultural property. Each culture typically has complex rules and customs regarding the traditional designs represented on the poles. The designs are generally considered the property of a particular clan or family group of traditional carvers, and this ownership of the designs may not be transferred to the person who has commissioned the carvings. There have been protests when those who have not been trained in the traditional carving methods, cultural meanings, and protocol have made fake totem poles for what could be considered crass public display and commercial purposes. The misappropriation of coastal Pacific Northwest culture by the art and tourist trinket market has resulted in production of cheap imitations of totem poles, executed with little or no knowledge of their complex stylistic conventions or cultural significance. These include imitations made for commercial and even comedic use in venues that serve alcohol and in other settings that are insensitive or outright offensive to the sacred nature of some of the carvings. The Haisla First Nation of the Pacific Northwest began a lengthy struggle to repatriate the Kwakwaka'wakw totem pole from Sweden's Museum of Ethnography. Their successful efforts were documented in Gil Cardinal's National Film Board of Canada documentary, Totem, The Return of the Kwakwaka'wakw Pole. In October 2015, a Tlingit totem pole was returned from Hawaii to Alaska after being taken from a village by Hollywood actor John Barrymore in 1931. The carving that this MiniBlock set represents tells the tale of the legend of Fog Woman, also known as Raven and the Fog Woman. The legend of Fog Woman is a story that the native Tlingit of southeastern Alaska used to explain the bounty of salmon during certain months and the disappearance of salmon in other months. The tale also includes a lesson of consequence for disrespect and cruelty of women. A long time ago, Raven and his two servants built a camp at the mouth of a river. Towards the end of the year, they went out fishing to stock up for the winter, but could not catch anything to keep them fed through the cold months. One day a woman appeared to them out of the fog that had set in for the day. Neither Raven nor his servants saw her approach. She knew they were hungry, so she asked the Raven for his hat, which she then turned upside down, and out of the fog in the hat drew some salmon. These were the first salmon ever created. Raven took the woman back to his camp and married her, and she produced salmon for him and his servants every day. Eventually, Raven started to take his wife for granted and became critical of her. In a moment of anger one day, he argued with her and hit her, and she fled from him. He followed and tried to grab her, but each time he closed his arms, they went right through her like she was made of fog. She ran until she reached the water and then kept going into the sea, where she disappeared and took the salmon with her. There are variations of the story of Fog Woman up and down the coast of the Pacific Ocean in Canada and Alaska. In some versions, Fog Woman is a chief's daughter who grants Raven the right to marry. The story explains the origin of salmon that are a critical part of the diet for the people who live in the area. Every spring, when the fog returns to the land from the ocean, it is Fog Woman returning along with the salmon who start making their way upstream to their traditional spawning grounds. Brother Bear is a 2003 video game based on the 2003 animated film of the same name. It was released November 4th, 2003 for the Game Boy Advance, and November 11th for Microsoft Windows. From the manual. Long ago, when the earth was young and ice still covered the land, the great spirits of the Northern Lights wielded the power of transformation. During this time, man and animal lived on equal terms, competing for land and food. In Disney's Brother Bear, Kenai is a headstrong teenager who does not understand the need for balance in nature. Driven by emotion after losing his oldest brother to a bear, he seeks revenge. The Great Spirits intervene and help Kenai learn about balance and miraculously transform him into a bear. Now that Kenai is a bear, he is hunted by his remaining brother, Denahi. Before Denahi can track Kenai down, he must make it to the mystical place where the lights meet the earth, home of the Great Spirits, so that he may regain his human form. Not knowing the way himself, Kenai enlists the help of a pesky cub named Koda. Over the course of his perilous journey with Koda, Kenai is forced to question everything he knows about the meaning of brotherhood. Ultimately, he realizes that his physical transformation from a man to a bear is insignificant compared to the change that has occurred within himself. Development. The PC version is a 3D platform game developed by Disney Interactive and released on November 11, 2003. The Game Boy Advance version was released November 4, 2003. It is a platforming game that was published by Disney Interactive and developed by Vicarious Visions. Plot. In a post-Ice Age Alaska, the local tribesmen believe that all creatures are created through the Great Spirits, who are said to appear in the form of an aurora. A trio of brothers, Sitka the oldest, Denahi the middle, and Kenai the youngest, return to their tribe for Kenai to receive his totem, a necklace in the shape of a different animal, from Tanana, the shaman of the brothers' tribe. The particular animal it represents symbolizes the trait he must achieve to call himself a man. Unlike Sitka, who gained the eagle for guidance, and Denahi, who gained the wolf for wisdom, Kenai receives the bear of love. He objects to his totem, stating that bears are thieves and believes his opinion is proven to be a fact when a grizzly bear steals their basket of salmon, which Kenai did not tie properly in a hurry to receive his totem. Kenai searches for the basket and finds it devoured. He sees the bear, provokes it, his brothers find him, but a fight ends on top of a large glacier. When the bear gets the upper hand, Sitka sacrifices himself to save his brothers by dislodging the glacier, although the bear survives the fall. After Sitka's funeral, the furious Kenai blames the bear for Sitka's death and rejects his totem. He hunts down and chases the bear up onto a rocky cliff, fighting and eventually slaying it. The spirits, represented by Sitka's spirit in the form of a bald eagle, arrive and transform Kenai into a bear after the dead bear's body evaporates and joins them. Denahi arrives and falsely believes that Kenai was killed by the bear from earlier. Kenai falls off the cliff and down some rapids, but survives. Denahi vows to avenge Kenai. Kenai awakens as he is healed by Tanana and discovers his transformation. Tanana cannot understand Kenai, but advises him to go to the mountain where the lights touch the earth to find Sitka and be turned back into a human. But only when he atones for his actions. She vanishes without explanation. Kenai quickly discovers that he can now understand the wildlife, meeting a pair of moose brothers named Rut and Took. He gets caught up in a trap, but is freed by an outgoing bear cub named Koda. After they evade Denahi, who is still unaware that the bear he is pursuing is Kenai himself, Koda reveals to Kenai that his mother is missing. They make a deal. Kenai will escort Koda to the annual salmon run, and then the cub will lead Kenai to the mountain nearby. Along the way, the two form a brotherly relationship, and are joined by Rut and Took, and ride on the backs of a woolly mammoth herd. Kenai and Koda eventually continue their journey on foot. After another ordeal with Denahi through a volcanic field, Kenai and Koda eventually reach the salmon run, where a large number of bears live like a family, including the leader Tug. Kenai adjusts to his surroundings and is happy spending time with other bears. During story time among the bears, Koda tells a story about his mother recently fighting human hunters on a glacier. reminding Kenai of his and his brothers' fight with a bear that led to Sitka's death, making him realize that Koda's mother was the bear he killed the entire time. Horrified at what he has done, Kenai runs away in a fit of guilt, but Koda soon follows him. Downhearted, Kenai confesses the truth to Koda, who runs away grief-stricken, and a remorseful Kenai leaves to reach the mountain. Meanwhile, Rut and Took, having had a falling out, reconcile in front of Koda, prompting him to forgive Kenai. On the mountain, Kenai is cornered by Denahi, but their battle is interrupted by Koda, who steals Denahi's spear. Kenai goes to Koda's aid out of love, prompting Sitka to appear and change him back into a human, much to Denahi and Koda's surprise. However, upon realizing that Koda needs him because of his own mistake, Kenai asks Sitka to transform him back into a bear with Denahi's support. Sitka complies, and Kenai resumes his bear form. Koda is reunited briefly with the spirit of his mother, before she and Sitka return to the spirits. In the end, Kenai lives with the rest of the bears and gains his title as a man through being a bear. Reception for the PC version. Game Zone rated the game 7 out of 10, PC Format UK rated it 27 out of 100, and PC Gamer UK rated it 62 out of 100. Childrensoftware.com gave the game 4.5 out of 5, writing, "The humor and adventure make the transition from large to small screen nicely. Although the game is marketed to kids ages 6 and older, the gameplay can be challenging. Our 9 to 14-year-old testers liked the game." JKD Media of GameZone said, "This game appears to be a fun, action-packed game with lots of cool mini-games that can be played independently. I say appear because frankly, due to the many technical issues in running the game, we didn't get all the way through the game. There is a lot of game here though, with plenty of easy exploration and item collecting." Super Kids gave the game a 3.0 for educational value, 4.0 for kid appeal, and 5.0 for ease of use. It said, "While Brother Bear is a fun-packed game that reinforces the importance of friendship and listening, it does not address the classic 3 R's," and noted even if kids have not seen Disney's Brother Bear movie, they will enjoy this fun adventure. The GBA version. GameZone rated the game 8 out of 10, Nintendo Power rated it 3.3 out of 5, Nintendo Joe rated it 6.6 out of 10. Today's build was given to me as a gift from friends I made during my time living in Alaska. I miss you guys, and thank you. The brick set itself would greatly benefit from some glue, however, as the wing pieces are quick to fall out. I am disappointed in the product's materials and website for not providing any information about the real-life totem pole. Even though there is a part of the website that says, "Learn fascinating facts about totem poles as you build," I had to do my own research to find out what this facsimile is supposed to represent and the story behind the symbols on the totem pole. The fog woman, holding 2 salmon, sits atop 2 servants with Raven above her. I will have a side-by-side comparison of what a real-life Legend of Fog Woman totem pole looks like from Totem Bite Park in Ketchikan, Alaska. I chose the game Brother Bear for the GBA because the main character is a native Alaskan before turning into a bear, as well as it being a game already in my collection. Total build time, 3 hours, 45 minutes, 35 seconds, which means you could watch, at the time of whaling at 20 minutes, the drums of winter at 90 minutes, from the first people at 45 minutes, in Igirus time at 20 minutes, Joe Sun at 19 minutes, and most of on the spring ice. These are all films that are a part of the Alaskan Native Heritage film series. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Remember to like, subscribe, share, ring that bell, all the things for the YouTubes. Thank you.